Awesome Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here with my review for the Power Rangers Lightning Collection, Time Force Blue Ranger, and Vector Cycle, part of the Deluxe figure sets that will include something like a bike, like we got before with the Omega Ranger, and here we have Time Force Blue, and we'll get started with the accessories first. You have two sets of hands, the ones that are on him, which are for either holding the bike handles or holding the weapons, because he comes with two weapons, and then you also have your standard closed fist right here, aka the standard Figure Arts fist. I know it's not Figure Arts, but that's like the standard what always comes with them. You got the signature blade weapons here, which are honestly fine. You know, there's not a lot of details to these in the first plate, check out these first plates in the first place, so they look good for what they are. I think they did a good job with the clear plastic on here. There's really nothing too big to complain about. Not to mention, it's really nice you can actually combine them together, which is just a cool detail. I mean, I can't imagine they wouldn't do it, but it's just always nice to be able to do stuff like that. And then you have the sidearm blaster here as well, which isn't as nicely painted, but honestly not really a deal breaker. It gets the main details you need to done. Obviously, the main accessory is the bike, which we're gonna go over that first, honestly. It's a little bit mixed thoughts on it. I mean, for the most part, setting aside a certain cosmetic detail, which I'm gonna talk about, it's not that bad looking. It does feel a little bit cheap, at least to me. It's got kind of a cheaper feel, more akin to something like one of the older Bandai America figures. It's not like terribly cheap or anything like that. It just feels a little bit cheaper, especially without the guns on it. Like when you get it, these little guns are separate and you can take them off or put them on however you want. But when these aren't on there, it feels even cheaper and lighter than I would have expected. But outside of that, it's overall not bad looking. I mean, the plastic has a nice quality to it. It's got kind of a nice sheen to it. You can see there, both the white here and then the black on there. You got a nice kind of almost matte finish on the blue, which looks good. The silver paint here shines nicely. Like the paint on it doesn't look half bad. Like in regards to this part, it's overall solid. I mean, I'm not expecting too much more out of it in that regard. My main complaint about it aesthetically really just comes from the visor, which is just kind of strange. If you look at pictures of it, the visor is just proportioned differently. Like technically, this little visor piece does technically take up like the same real estate, but it's positioned in a really weird way. Like if you look at it in the show, it's like more spread out, but where this seems like it's awkwardly squished in. It almost seems like they scaled this visor differently from this, and it creates this weird discrepancy, which is just really strange. It makes it look really honestly kind of odd looking, and I actually really like the Vector Cycles. They're probably one of my more favorite cycles, and it's kind of disappointing because I don't know, this just makes it look really strange to me. Maybe it's just me, but I know it's ill proportioned. It's not just me that it's ill proportioned, but maybe it's just me that it bothers. Not to mention, I find the visor really hard to kind of get to stay on there, which is really annoying. But yeah, and then obviously it can roll here. You can see the major feature of it is whee! And it's got kind of nice, actually kind of rubbery wheels, which is kind of neat. And you can see there's the kickstand for putting it up for display or having him stand next to it. But I don't know. I find the bike to be a little bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Real quick before I forget, I almost forgot about one of the most important accessories, which is the alternate head, which quite honestly, at least to me, doesn't look that much like Lucas. It almost looks more like the version of Lucas where like you think you see your friend Lucas on the bus and you're like, oh, hey bro, how's it going? Oh man, that's not Lucas, my bad, man. That's like the type of Lucas it looks like. We can talk about the figure itself. I have some mixed thoughts on this one, to be honest. There's also some oddities with this one. It's not completely awful or anything. It feels like both this and the bike for me have all these little weird discrepancies that kind of don't line up for me. Let's start with the helmet though, because I'll say overall I think the helmet's pretty well done. It's not perfect, but I think just standalone the proportions on the helmet look really nice. I do have a few little classic Lightning Collection mistakes here or there, like there's a tiny black smudge here and the lines don't line up exactly right there. But for the most part, I like the helmet. Blue's probably my favorite Core 5 helmet, and I think they did a good job just on the helmet, like in a vacuum by itself. Where I do have some problems is there's some like weirdness to the proportions of his body. He's got a skinnier mold than a lot of the main figures, and it looks just a little bit off. I think that Time Force Red has a sort of similar one, but it looks just really strange here, and it's kind of weird because I feel that the proportions here make his helmet feel too big for his body, whereas I felt the helmet was a little bit too blown up on Time Force Red, so like almost inverses of each other. And I was looking at pictures of the suits in show, and to be honest, when you do look at this, the skinnier proportion here with the helmet, it actually is fairly accurate to what the Time Ranger version of the footage looks like, but maybe not so much the Time Force footage, which can be you know, sometimes a problem because sometimes we'll have puffier actors for the American footage. So it does look decently accurate, actually, to the Japanese footage, which is nice. But for me, there still is just something awkward about it. I think it's just about the way the waist comes down to here. It almost looks like it's halfway between the skinniness of the girl mold and the puffier guy mold. It's just, I don't know. Something about it is awkward and off for me just a little bit. And I think one of the main things that contributes to that is this chest piece here. Because again, this little visor piece is ill-proportioned if you look at it in the suit, whether it's the US US or Japanese one. The visor in proportion to the white area is just off, and the white area I think is supposed to go down a little bit more based on the pictures. And this is a case where I wasn't pulling up the pictures to be like, oh, let's find all the inaccuracies to see how Hasbro hates us, blah, blah, blah. It was more like, I was like, something feels off. Let me go look at some pictures. And yeah, there's just something off about this. It's funny that both the proportions on the symbol for this and this were just off. It matches, but it's kind of unfortunate. Like, I just wish it was a little bit better in that regard, especially since I was kind of looking forward to this figure, to be honest. So before I forget, because I wanted to do a comparison here it is next to the original version, which, you know, obviously you can see, despite some of my problems with this one, it's a superior version all around. It's not one of those weird muscle figures. Although it's worth noting that, you know, despite the, like, huge pec muscles on this guy, the proportions on, like, the visor symbol on his chest are a little bit more accurate, which I just find to be kind of funny. So just as far as negatives go, I unfortunately have really loose joints on the legs on this one. It makes it feel rather cheap, which is, well, just unfortunate. But otherwise, you have your standard, you know, articulation here. You got the hinge joint here, ball joint, swiveling, elbow joint here, swiveling at the fist, ball joint at the leg, swiveling. You got a knee joint right here. You got your little hinge joint right here. You got the hinge joint at the waist, ball joint at the chest, and the nice ball joint at the head. So same articulation as always, but it's just a bit of an awkward release for me, honestly. Like, between the loose joints, the weird proportions on the symbols, it's a lot more awkward than I thought it was going to be. It's not 100% awful. Like, just having it stand there before I started the review, it honestly doesn't look half bad. He still looks pretty decent, and I think the helmet looks pretty well proportioned, and it looks cool sitting there next to the bike, and he can look cool sitting there on the bike. I just feel, for me personally, and maybe it's just, you know, my personal quirks involving it, and maybe it's just my personal taste, but it's a little bit of a disappointment. It's not like it's anywhere outright awful, but there's all kinds of little things that make this release feel off and make me feel like they're not worth it for the price. I would say that if you are watching this and you see the flaws and you don't care so much and you like what you see, then, you know, maybe give it a shot. But I would definitely wait for a sale on this one. I kind of am hoping for an updated version of the Time Force red and blue molds. Nothing that's going to make me have that at the top of my list or anything, but there's just something off about this release for me. But that's about it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps, ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.